Sarah, let's talk about documentation for a minute. Let's talk about the paperwork that you have to have in order to make sure that somebody's available, if you're not available, to make medical decisions and then financial decisions. That's right up your alley.
Absolutely. In terms of estate planning, there are 3 documents that everyone should have. Everyone should have a last will and testament, no matter whether you're rich or poor, young or old. Everyone should have a financial power of attorney document. And finally, an advance directive for health care.
Explain those last 2. We all know what a will does. What is the financial power of attorney? When does that kick in?
The last 2 documents, the financial power of attorney and the health care directive, are geared towards planning for life. So while you are alive, but perhaps you cannot manage your finances or you cannot make health care decisions. So the financial power of attorney is appointing someone else to act as your agent, to handle your finances, real property, contracts, any kind of business transaction you can think of. If someone needed to call the utility company and deal with them, a good, thorough financial power of attorney would give an agent access.
Now, what happens if something happens and your family doesn't have that?
If you don't have a financial power of attorney and you become incapacitated, then there's no one authorized to make financial decisions for you. And a third party, like a bank or the utility company or the insurance company, will not talk to you just because you say, well, I'm blah blah's daughter. They're very tight about that. So you end up having to file a petition to be granted a conservator over someone's finances in the probate court. When a conservator is appointed, if I'm appointed conservator over Nancy, then I'm given the authority to make financial decisions for her, and she loses that authority. So it's a very formal proceeding in the probate court because the court is taking away her due process rights. There is a hearing. Usually the person whose rights are being taken away, the court wants them there, present. So there's testimony about why they do not have the ability that usually they hear, so it can be emotionally damaging.
How much time does that take? That seems, that's a lot. It's not quick.
Months. There are statutes for emergency conservatorships and guardianships. If it's over a person's, not their financial, but their personal decision making, their healthcare decisions, where they're going to live, the terminology is guardianship. But they're parallel, guardian, conservator. 3 months between filing a petition and an actual hearing normally.
And at that point, things become a mess. 3 months of back and forth without paying bills. Now, this is kind of where, Nancy, you come in. It sounds easy. I go to mom and dad, and I say, listen, Dad, you're 90. It's time to give us a little bit of, make sure we can help you if something happens. But he says, no, I don't want to, no, I'm not doing that.
What he says usually is, well, wait until it happens. That's
Right.
what they say, right?
Wait until I have a stroke, and then we'll talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the bottom line is, we have to remember that, particularly when we think about the traditionalist generation, which were born before 1945, they're very private people, and they really are very self-sufficient, independent, stubborn, all that good stuff. And so
everyone here is younger than that, by the way.
Audience, and I say,
This is no one here is stubborn, and they're all
right,
younger
exactly.
than that.
It filters down the generations. But the bottom line is that we all want to be in control. And so when you're trying to talk with your family members, you can't really say to them, I want you to give me your power of attorney. They're going to, look at you and say, forget it. I can take care of myself. And so you have to kind of dance around it a little bit, and you have to empower people, and you have to help your family member, your older family member, say, look at, I want you to be in control as long as you possibly can. But Uncle Sam's going to come after it if you don't put one of us in charge. And sometimes that really does help.
I was going to say, I agree. Conservatorships are very costly, the thousands of dollars, and then a conservator is entitled to fees and has to be bonded, and there's a premium for that. And so in a generation where people don't like spending money, sometimes that can be a good point to bring up. All
right, so let's talk about logistically how this could work. You have how can a parent, someone in their, let's say their 80s or their 90s, still feel comfortable? What's a solution here that you can make mom and dad feel comfortable that you're not taking over their finances, but you're still able to help financially if something comes up? Logistically, what happens there?
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't know that you're going to get people comfortable. So I think we have to get rid of really thinking about that. You know, making people happy, making people comfortable doesn't work. What you want to do, though, is you want to figure out who in the family or who outside the family might be able to have the best chance at talking with the elder. And it may not be you. You know, it may be a grandchild. It may be...
it's whoever they actually like, right? So it's
yeah,
like,
and trust. And
there's usually at least one kid that they like, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We've got 4 in my family.
Right, there you go.
My dad, I think, likes one of us once in a while. So,
and actually, to be honest with you, the hardest part, more than anything, is dealing with people when they're starting to have issues with cognitive challenges, because they don't often realize that they can't do. I met with several people today in that situation. They think they can take care of their finances, and you know, and that's when, and that's another whole. I mean, I could spend an hour and a half just talking to you about that alone.
But is it as simple as setting up a family account that has $50,000 that the one son or the one daughter has access to, but everything else doesn't? There's no access. I mean, is that something you see done?
Well, sometimes what I recommend is giving that. Like I had a client who was 94 and she still wanted to be involved in everything. And what we did is we gave her her own little account that had like 20,000. It doesn't sound little, but it is. You know, for her, it had to be at least that. But no more than that. And then that way she felt like she was still involved, but the rest of her money, you know, her son was, the golden boy son, was kind of managing for her.
That's the one that they talk to.
Yeah.
All right, now let's go back to this. There's a lot, we're talking about paying for health care, we're paying for getting fixed for illness, getting healthy again, not going into a home at this point. Sarah, you've done a lot of work around Medicaid, and Medicaid is really fascinating. If you don't know about this, qualifying for Medicaid, you can still have lots and lots of money and still qualify for Medicaid. Explain those rules to our audience, first of all.
Just to clarify, Medicaid in Georgia is the health insurance program for the impoverished, and there are tons of different types of Medicaid. There's Medicaid for children, and there's Medicaid for the disabled who are on supplemental security income. We're talking about one small niche of Medicaid, which is Medicaid for long-term care. Medicaid for long-term care is only available to individuals who are in skilled nursing facilities. So in a nursing home, not in assisted living, not at home. There are some limited programs that provide home care, but their portion of the budget is very, very small. So I always mention them, but you know that they're very limited and that there are a long waiting list for them. So we're almost always talking about individuals in nursing homes. In order to be eligible for Medicaid for nursing home care, they look at your resources. For a single individual, you can have $2,000 in countable resources. I say countable because they don't count everything. They don't count your home. They don't count one of your cars. They don't count your tax-qualified retirement funds, your IRA, your 401k. There are some technical rules there. You have to be taking your required minimum distributions. So what we see then is we see a person who has a home and the majority of their assets in a retirement account, and they can still qualify for Medicaid. For a married couple, they can keep an additional $115,000 just in countable whatever cash. So there you can see a couple with she has an IRA, he has an IRA. They've got a small savings account, their little nest egg in the home.
And a paid-for home.
And a paid-for home, and one of them can still qualify.
But what does that then pay for? So let's say you have a $1 billion home paid for. and $1 million in retirement accounts. And
There's actually a max on the home.
What-
It's
oh,
right
what is
around
the-
$500,000
okay, so
in
so that
equity.
takes care of a lot of houses in Georgia, especially after the real estate crash. There's plenty of $1 million homes worth 500. So you have $1 million in retirement account money, a paid-for home, $115,000 in checking. What does that supplement, or is that? Tell me the kind of facility you can go to at that financial level.
It is the cost of it is the Medicaid rate, which we were talking about nursing homes at $7,000 a month. Medicaid doesn't pay more than about $5,000 a month. So Medicaid pays that rate above what your income will cover. So if I'm on Medicaid in a nursing home and I have $1,500 in Social Security each month, I can keep $50, and the rest of it goes to the nursing home. And then there's a balance. Medicaid picks up the rest.
Is there any? Did you have something to add to that?
I was just going to say, and this is extremely important for people to hear, you have to be very careful with Medicaid facilities. And one of the things I always say to families is that, and I feel very strongly about this, and is that when you're trying to get a family member, if they do need a nursing home like my mother did, there was a point where her Alzheimer's, it was just impossible to keep her at home, and I didn't have the finances to do 24/7, and it wasn't the right thing to do for her or me. And I wanted her in a good place, you know. Well, if you go to an only Medicaid facility, you're in trouble because you're going to have somebody in a room with 5 or 6 people, and really, it's what the horror story kind of stuff. There are some very good nursing homes that accept Medicaid, but there's a limited amount of beds available. And then if we're talking about women...
So they'll only accept some Medicaid admittance. Okay.
Right.
Residents.
And then if we're looking at male beds, you know, if you have an elder parent that's male, then it's even more limited because there are a lot more women in nursing homes and more female beds available than male beds. So it's really, in my opinion, I say to people, 3 to 6 months at least of full pay.
Private pay.
Before you consider the...
If you have a facility that accepts both
Right.
private pay and Medicaid patients, they might get $7,000 or $8,000 from their private pay patient, but they know they're not getting more than $5,000 from their Medicaid patient. So they have an interest in getting that private pay patient. So to the extent that individuals have the funds to do it, yeah, we absolutely say you will be able to find a better facility if you go in as a private pay, spend some money for a few months, and then we transition you over to Medicaid.
And there are waiting lists, and then there are not waiting lists. I mean, I'm learning now, you know, I've been in this for 30 years, and now all of a sudden they're not allowing some of the places waiting lists, which means that you have to continually call to find out, thank you, whether your family member is, you know, I mean, they're not going to call you, trust me. And then there are some very good nursing homes that do not accept Medicaid at all. So.
And I want to ask you, Nancy, a question. I'm going to table this for a second. I want to ask you the process of beginning to look for the right place for mom and dad. I think that's really important. But I also maybe want to go through a progression here because, and get your opinion as our panelists on when you do all of these proactive steps, right? Planning is great. The problem is that people are procrastinators and we don't necessarily plan. It's something like 50% of individuals that are worth $10 million and more don't even have a will. I mean, there's some pretty amazing stats here. A lot of this stuff is stuff that we don't really want to address because it's about getting sick, it's about getting old, it's about dying, it's about dealing with family members that you don't like. I mean, it sounds like Thanksgiving. It's coming up. But let's just say then if we have this progression of when things get done, do you start with the right long-term care policy and then get a trust and then find a nursing home? What's the average family? I'm going to start with you, Erica. What process do we go through to starting today if you're starting fresh?
If you're starting fresh, the first thing you need to be aware of, what is Medicare going to pay? Okay, so we need to all be aware that there's going to be a crisis, Mom.
Okay, let's also qualify for, let's say I'm 65 and above. I'm starting
65
today.
and above.
65 and above.
Mom, there's going to be a crisis. Medicare is going to help pay a little bit, but after that, we really need to start planning for this. So looking at long-term care, which hopefully has been addressed in the mid to late 40s, at least the conversation may have started by then. We hope to have a long-term care policy in place. Mom then goes down. She hopefully goes into the hospital, and if she is my loved one, she is either getting admitted or she's coming home. There is no middle ground for me. If she then is admitted and ends up in the nursing home, she spends however much time she's allowed to spend there. She then gets transitioned to whatever nicest, and hopefully have some help finding the nicest care facility that we can find, being aware that there are less and less beds being assigned to long-term care and more to rehab care. I don't know if you've seen that pattern. So we have a shrinking universe of beds. If we do not have long-term care in place and we start talking to the attorney and saying we need to spend down, we need to do this and that, being aware that mom can be assigned in Dalton. She can get a nursing home in Savannah. It's not going to be convenient necessarily for us if it is a pure Medicare or Medicaid issue. So at that point, that's the part where I get involved. We then start asking questions like, so where's your legal stuff and who's in charge of what? And that's when we pass on to Sarah.
Nice transition.
Thank you.
So again, let's continue here. Again, I'm 65 and I have no will and I don't have any trusts per se. What do I need to do next?
In terms of legal documents, you got to have your three required documents. You got to have your will, your financial power of attorney, and we discussed what that is. Important thing to mention, when you name someone as agent under your financial power of attorney, of course, you're not losing anything. It's like giving someone a key to your house. Someone else has been given the authority, but you're not losing anything. Those can be drafted to be effective immediately or to be springing, so they're not effective until you suffer some kind of disability.
It might be a good way to do this for a parent who's not
those who are
excited
very-
to hand
yeah.
over control.
Yeah. I'm okay with doing both. The downside of the springing is that one issue with financial powers of attorney is you've got to get your bank to accept it. You've got to get SunTrust to accept it. You've got to get Schwab to accept it. You've got to get all these institutions where your stuff is. They've got to be okay with it. They're very worried about getting sued, so they are very, very strict about it. We advocate a belt and suspenders approach, so you sign your financial power of attorney document, and then you check with your financial institution, and you say, is this form okay by you? Is there something else you would like for me to sign? Because time and time again, we have clients calling saying, I took your beautiful 20-page document to Bank of America, and they shut the door. And we do our best to draft them as broadly as possible. So if you add the springing provision, that's just another hurdle that you have to prove to Bank of America that the person who signed the document is in fact disabled. And finally, the Advance Directive for Healthcare. The Georgia Advance Directive for Healthcare has two parts. One, you appoint a healthcare agent, someone who can make medical decisions for you if you are not able to communicate them yourself. To me, that's the most important part, because that's, no matter what's happening, if you fall down here today and have a stroke, there is someone who can make healthcare decisions for you, who can get in, can have access to your records.
Otherwise, who makes all those decisions?
The default is next of kin. So if you named your spouse as agent, your next of kin might still be your spouse. But I hear stories of people still having issues, even if, without having that document, even though they are next of kin. And then, of course, proving that you're the spouse or the daughter and the only one.
What causes the most trouble out of that group if you do not have?
Depends on this scenario. You mean out of the three documents? It just depends on the scenario. The Advance Directive for Healthcare is important when dad has a stroke.
And that's why when you come to an attorney,
Yeah.
you typically do that as a package. You're going to do all of those
Absolutely.
areas, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We call them a power pack.
And this is not so cost-wise though. What are we talking? What does it cost? I mean, I guess I can tell you what it costs. It can cost almost a little bit to a whole lot, depending on the attorney, the firm.
Absolutely, as low as maybe $500 for the package, up to several thousand. Depending on, there's some firms that really handle high-end estates, so they just have higher fees, and that's who they're geared towards. But you can see a wide range. It's absolutely worth the cost, and you can find reasonable fees for that sort of thing, in my opinion.
So as we then move into finding a place, I can't tell you how many clients, sons and daughters have come in grown children coming in and asking, hey, how do I find the right place for mom and dad? And that's one of your main areas of specialty. So take us through that process of finding the right place.
Well, I'm a grammar person, and so I talk to families about finding the best place, because the reason with right is that then you feel like you could do something wrong. So what we're trying to do here is look at the best possible options. You know, what do we have going forward that would help? And it's tricky sometimes when you've got two people. You've got, say, somebody that's 80 that has dementia and needs to be in, say, a memory care community, and you've got a wife who's 10 years younger who could maybe even stay at home. And so, you know, you have to kind of look at all that and take all that into consideration. It's not, what I say to people is, once somebody reaches the age of 70, that's called, well, actually 65 to 75 is the young old. But once they get, and it gets older as I get older, but once they get to be at least 70, everybody in this room that's 70, you should be thinking about where do you want to live when you grow up. You know, you need to be doing your homework and start looking, just like we look for schools. We need to start looking at assisted living in your community, where you think they're going to be. You know, look at long-term care, nursing homes, rehab centers. Let me tell you, some of the rehab centers are pretty awful. And so here your family member breaks a hip, goes in the hospital, and the doctor says, oh, send him to this one. It's right around the, a corner. I mean, think about where we are right now. There's several that I would prefer not to have people go to. The doctors don't go out and see these places. So you got to do your homework ahead of time, just like you would pick a school for your kid. And I hate to say it that way.
But again, you do that as a profession, though, too.
I mean, I can help you with that, certainly.
Right.
I'm just trying to empower you.
Let's go through a couple other things here. So we've talked about nursing care. We've talked about finding the right place. I want to get to cognitive dementia and issues in a little bit. But let's also talk about the logistics of getting bills paid. I had, about 6 months ago on Money Matters, one of the executive directors of a company called CESI. It was Consumer Educational Services, Inc. They're out of North Carolina. One of the initiatives that they've had in the last couple of years is to try to help families that may have one or two or three siblings and parents that actually still have control of their checkbook. They still have control of their investment accounts, and they're home all day, and they take phone calls from people that are basically scamming them. And are there other organizations besides CESI, which again is I know that we had a lot of people call CESI to get some help with that, because they have counselors that almost serve as intermediaries to do that, and they help you say, look, we're going to help you pay these bills, and we're going to monitor these bills. What do you guys see in that respect of actually protecting our parents or our grandparents from getting scammed and then paying bills?
Well, the first thing on Medicare, when you enroll in Medicare, there's a part of the website where it says, please name a secondary person to help you with to empower this person to be able to help you with your Medicare bills. That becomes a really important thing to do on everything. And you're not giving away your authority, you're simply allowing someone else to help you with it. That has helped a lot of seniors, because it's my son, my daughter, my grandchild who's helping with this, and they'll call the insurance company for me, they'll call the pharmaceutical company, and they have the power to do that. So that shuts down a whole lot of conversation for grandma, grandpa, because please don't answer the phone, Joey over here is handling it for you. So that's the first thing we do on our end.
Okay. Sarah?
I think that it's important to have someone else who can look in on account statements, because you can pick up something, especially if it's a recurring issue. If it's a little bit here, I think in my history, I've seen the worst kinds of abuse, the worst damage done when there wasn't really anyone who was actively looking in on those kinds of things, and so the damage was done month after month after month, and then all of a sudden there's a lot of money missing.
Nancy, what do you see with the logistics of getting bills paid? And I also see this gray zone where mom and dad are okay to do this for a while, and then there's a period of time where you you're not sure if they're really competent to do that or not. How do you solve the gray zone in
thinking about a
this?
situation right now that I'm working with, and this might help just give you an example. So this is a gentleman who had his own business, was very successful. He's 90 years old. He's sharp as all get out, except he started having some issues lately. You know, everybody's fine until, right? And now all of a sudden he's starting to have some short-term memory issues. He's getting more confused, and he goes in and out. And so what I ended up having to help this family with was basically to help the adult children stand strong and say to him, Dad, we've got to take this over now because, you know, you're in and out, you know. Well, I'm fine. I can handle this. And essentially, you know, we were able to get one of the kids who had the best relationship to let, you know, him oversee it. You know, he can still see what's going on, but the one son's going to take over. So it's extremely important because, you know, you think somebody's okay, and then, you know, when they're in their 80s, that's when we start seeing more and more issues.
And let me add one other personal experience. My father and his wife were living in Hilton Head until last year, a year and a half ago. We did not know that my father was double medicated on 4 sets of pills. Talk about non-compliance and people ending up in and out of the emergency room. My father was in the emergency room 11 times in 2011, and it looked like a compliance issue, but it was a mismanagement of medication. If you can do nothing more than get your hands on what people are taking, check out those pill boxes. My father insisted he was fine. Well, we got 3 of these today and none of them tomorrow, so it can be done. It can be offered nicely. It does not have to be threatening.
I want to ask our panelists about the future of costs, and that's really a kind of an opinion question because nobody really knows about long-term care facility costs and healthcare costs, but it's good to hear from our panelists. In the meantime, I know that we've already been passing around those index cards, so we've got a couple people on both sides doing that, and we're going to be doing Q&A here fairly soon. So if you can just pass those questions down to Kelsey and Amanda and James and Kelly in the back, and we'll get those in coming up in a few minutes here. Yeah. So let's go. Well, let's go. A couple things. Let's go back to my Alzheimer's question and talk about the future of that cost because it's to me it's the most. If I've ever seen any disaster financially, the financial disasters that I've seen in the 15 some years that I've been in this business have revolved around dementia, and you can see real fortunes go away if you're paying for around the clock 2 nurses or three shifts a day. Mom or dad do not want to leave a home, and they don't want to go to a facility. You're talking about real costs that can really eat through money, and let's address that, and then the future of that care and why it's so expensive and where we are on that.
You know, it's also emotionally expensive, if you know what I'm saying. It's extremely stressful. It can be. And again, that is why it's so important, you know, to be as proactive as you can and to find out what's available. The one thing I want to say to families out here right now, and you may chuckle at this saying that I have, but when people have cognitive impairment and they think they know what they're doing and they really can't make appropriate decisions for themselves, then you have to work around it in what we call in the field therapeutic lying. Okay? And what that means is you have to be creative and figure out ways to make sure your family member's safe. And that means that you can't always be honest. And I know that sounds terrible. And sometimes it takes a person like myself, and there's many of us, not just me, that are out there doing this kind of work, you know, a counselor that understands these kinds of issues to try to coach you on how to do this. But you can't just reason with somebody who has frontal temporal problems cognitively. You know, you can sit there till, all the different sayings, the cows come out or whatever in Georgia. I don't know what it is. You know what I'm saying? So, it's true. And that's the hardest thing for people because there's not a role, it's not a role reversal. Your parent's not becoming the child, but your parent's becoming dependent. And that's hard. And it's not like caring for a 13-year-old and making decisions for a 13-year-old. You're having to make decisions for somebody that's so much older.
It just really seems to go against people's gut reaction to behavior. You want to, sometimes you want to explain why someone said something that is incorrect or why their memory is not correct. And I'm no expert on the social work aspect of that and the psychological aspect of that, but I've seen professionals speak about it, and I know that's a big topic, is you really have to learn how to deal with someone who has dementia, because it's not just memory issues. I think a lot of people think of dementia and they think, oh, you can't remember things. But there's it's behavioral, it's personality. It goes way beyond just memory.
And
But
then
I
it
hadn't heard that
becomes
term
costly.
before, therapeutic lying. I've never, that's something like they do in,
I
do
sorta
they do that
made
in
it up.
Washington? Do they do that?
Let's not go there. Is this being taped? Uh-oh.
This is completely apolitical comment, by the way.